Hi folks, welcome to a thrilling new episode of the Medical Device Cybersecurity Podcast. We're here joined by Etienne Nichols, who's going to help us understand a bit more about what's going on at the FDA and what manufacturers can do about the lengthy approval processes that we're seeing right now in the United States. What are some steps that you can take today to make sure that your device gets approved and that everything goes right, and what you can do for testing and different things like this. The topic idea actually came from a webinar that took place yesterday about what's going on within the Trump administration and the different things that have been happening at the FDA. Just to give you some of the notes that I got from yesterday's episode, was that in February we saw 10% of the workforce from the FDA leaving. So, device reviews were already canceled, MORA was a little bit lower. And then after that, we saw another slowdown on the 31st of March. And we saw 10,000 people, 10,000 more jobs being cut. Is that right, Etienne?
Yeah. In late March. So essentially what happened was the Health and Human Services section of the government announced deep cutting restructuring initiatives across a lot of the different departments. And my understanding is that their goal was to eliminate 20,000 positions and approximately 3,500 FDA jobs were set to be cut. So I don't have an exact number there, but it's quite a few.
Do we know what percentage of the workforce that is of the FDA?
Good question. I don't have
it's not insignificant.
It's not insignificant. That's a big number. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you see the thousands of medical devices and having that many people, and it's not just a sheer number of people that you lose. We talked about it yesterday. It's the different specializations that you have within medical devices and the different experience the team members bring to each medical device. So it's definitely a big loss. So Etienne, before we dive deeper into the topic, can you tell us a bit more about who you are and how you ended up in medical devices? What's your story here?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Etienne Nichols. You've already stated that. I'm the head of industry insights and education at Greenlight Guru, which is EQMS, quality management system, and EDC, electronic data capture system for medical devices specifically. So that's anything clinical data related, anything quality or regulatory related, or even product development. We help with design controls and risk management. In fact, that's actually one of our best kept secrets, one of the best things that we do out there. But that's what we do. From my side, I have a unique role in that I get to run our podcast, the Global Medical Device Podcast. I get to have conversations with Mathieu, which I really appreciate, and I get to go to events, and I'm involved in a lot of educational concepts. So where I came from, I was originally a mechanical engineer. I worked as a manufacturing engineer, working on cranial fixation and deep brain stimulation products. And then after that, I got into a regulatory role when the UDI requirements were rolled out for Class 2 medical devices. They put me on that project. I learned project management. I learned regulatory. And in that whole process, I got my PMP, the Project Management Professional Certification. And from there, I went into project management for product development. Always wanted to be in product development. And started working on drug delivery combination products. So that's what I worked on for quite a while before coming to Greenlight Guru, and it's been an interesting ride. Just as having worked in Fortune 500 companies, having worked in startup environments, and now at Greenlight Guru, having worked with, when I first came on, I was working directly with medical devices, probably 40 or 50 medical device companies. I've seen a lot of best practices and then maybe some not so best practices. So it's been eye-opening to see the industry from my perspective.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, seeing both sides is really a great thing to have in your pocket because there's two positive and negative on both sides. Yeah. So let's first talk about this. What is it like today? What's the landscape like in terms of submissions?
Okay, so submissions, we did run a poll just to see how people been affected. Like I said, it looked to me about 10, 15% were stating that they had a 3-month delay at least in their submission timelines. And now think about, primarily we're talking about 510K in this regard. Just the vast majority of submissions are 510K. We have that much saying that the bolus was, we know there's some sort of delay. We don't know exactly what that is. And from the earliest days, even late February, I was told by different customers, different companies, we've received emails from the FDA stating that, yes, you will be delayed. Just say, hey, expect delays. We've had some losses from the review team, et cetera. We have a few things shuffling around. So even that early, people were recognizing, okay, well, something's changing. The recommendation I give companies is if you have a submission and process, you really do need to be communicating with that FDA review team. Reach out to them, find out, are there delays? If you're not communicating with them and finding that out, you probably already have an issue. So find those things out as quickly as you can. Then the actual submissions themselves, there were different recommendations that came out of that webinar yesterday. Some were regarding informational meetings, so really take advantage of that pre-sub. A few others were things like the way you prepare your submission is more important than ever. Now, it's always been important to format things. Did you have a question?
No, I was going to ask more about that, so keep going, please.
Yeah. So maybe if you step away from the submission document, I think it's worth just taking a moment to look at human psychology in the world as it is today. We as humans have sort of been trained to have a much lower attention to detail. Our attention span is shrinking. And part of that, you could blame social media. You can blame news snippets, whatever you want to point to. It seems to be the case. Now, I like to think that the FDA is unaffected by that. However, when we're talking about human reviewers, there's a human element. So with the reduction in force, that just means these reviewers are going to be doing more work than they ever had before, and the expectation is that they do it in the same amount of time, most likely, just based on the things that you hear from Doge or however you pronounce that. The ostensible reason for all of these personnel cuts was to eliminate waste while maintaining the same level of quality. So whether they're going to be able to achieve that is yet to be seen. My personal opinion is hard to imagine that actually happening. That being said, there is waste at the FDA. So I think two things can be true. Should it have happened this way? Should we have cut all of these personnel? I mean, that's maybe that's an opinion. Will there still be delays? And were there elements that should be cut? There probably should have been done this way. I don't know. But
yeah, it's hard to tell. Time will tell eventually, I think.
Exactly.
What we should have done and what was wrong could have been improved. But that's the reality today that we have to face. So you mentioned one thing, which is reformatting, and I think it's very interesting to make it more structured. I think we talked yesterday about the executive summary, things like this. And I think when I think about cybersecurity a bit more now, and we've got a lot of guests on the podcast, and I think the clearest image that pops in my mind is Adam Shokas saying, a diagram is worth 1,000 words, or was it an image is worth 1,000 words? And I think in terms of how you can describe to the FDA that you've done your job in terms of cybersecurity is showing a complete image of what is your device like in terms of network, what are the interconnections that you're facing, and then from there, go on to develop on these points. But make sure that you have this concrete image at the beginning to show that you've understood your job, and from there move to the different conclusions that you're going to have on your medical device.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. One of the elements, this actually Michael Nilo recommended this. He said, listen, I know regulatory and marketing don't always mesh, which is really interesting because now I'm on a marketing side. I'm the subject matter expert for the marketing team at Greenlight Guru. But to his point, yes, they don't always mesh, but maybe it's time to start bringing your marketing team into your submission to really make that data clear and like you said, use those that data analytics, and the graphical data is more important than ever.
Yeah, and I think the marketing folks have especially a good eye for fixing a communication message to a different audience. And so you have to utilize these tools, especially, if you're a young medical device manufacturer and you don't have a lot of talent around, you have to be a bit innovative into how you use them, and definitely pulling out resources from marketing is a great way to write more accurate wording and text for the FDA.
Yeah, one of the things that when I started in marketing, I think as an engineer, I didn't have the respect that I had now for them. I now just tell them, like, guys, listen, you guys are like engineers for the human psychology. And so, I mean, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You had a question, though. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's awesome. I think we've done pretty well on understanding why the bottlenecks are increasing, why the length time are increasing. What are some other things that another medical device manufacturer might want to do in order to diminish the delay to manage the expectations of when a medical device is finally going to be approved?
Yeah. I made this just kind of a cartoon. I was just curious. I was working around with AI. I'm like, wow, if we made a cartoon about some of this stuff, what would it look like? And it came up with this cartoon with a man sitting at his desk. It said FDA across the desk, and he was holding up a sign that said, out of order, please regulate yourself. And I thought that was kind of funny, but that line, regulate yourself, this is more important than ever, really. So how do you do that? We talk about cybersecurity. We talk about usability, risk management. All of these different things are more important than ever. And maintaining traceability so that it's easy to show your work is more important than ever. Now, I was actually thinking about this morning, how I was at a conference recently where I had to give a talk. And it was a conference where it was primarily CEOs or founders in the audience. So I got up on stage and I raised my hand and said, hey, I'm about to, I was sharing the stage with another guy who's going to talk about the economic side, which I knew everybody would be more interested in. But I said, hey, everybody, how many of you are interested in quality and regulatory? How many of you like quality and regulatory? And I held my hand up and I looked at, and only one guy raised his hand. And you know what it looked like? He was holding a thumbs down. And CEOs and founders of medical device companies recognize that regulation feels like it slows us down. All right, that's fair. That's fine. But the best medical device companies look at these standards and say, okay, this keeps us using the right revision. This keeps us without having to go back and look up the documents, spending wasted time looking for documents that should be there, and maybe they are there. Maybe we're looking at the wrong one. Things get lost on desks. When we're talking about paper, they get lost on email. A good quality management system reduces all of that waste. So there is a reason for all these things. So to answer your question, I know I go off on all these tangents. If you want to be one of the companies that survives 2025 with submission deadlines and things changing, things all pushing out, you're going to be one of the companies that really pays attention to detail when it comes to cybersecurity and documenting how you perform that cybersecurity. The usability elements, the risk management, how it connects back to your design controls. And all of those elements are going to be traceable to CAPA's complaints so that when those adverse events happens in the field, you can show you've done your diligence. So it's more important than ever that companies really do things that they should have been doing already, but they need to more than ever value those and almost regulate themselves.
Oh, regulate themselves. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if you come up and having done the internal processes to make sure that you come out ready, and then you're much less likely to be pushed back by the FDA, and then you're more certain about having, okay, when the FDA finishes review, we're done. We don't have to go back and do more things. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing. I wonder, in this conference, all the CEOs that don't like regulations, does it mean that we have to do a lot more work as an industry to educate CEOs on the importance of what's your thought on this?
Well, it's a good question. Quality and regulatory suffers from a lack of PR. It's what we have had bad public relations, and I think it's because of a language barrier. So if I take my CEO hat off for a second, I put my quality and regulatory hat on, or vice versa, whatever you want to look at it. If I were to talk to the quality and regulatory, I would say, hey, how do you speak to a CEO? How do you speak to upper management, the C-suite? Someone told me this kind of early in my career. There's a pyramid that engineers speak in. They like all the details. They talk about all these different things, and then they go, that's the detail. This is really how this works. This is the material we're using. This is the stress analysis. This is all the Young's modulus, all this stuff. And now we're going to build it into this thing. And you need to flip the pyramid. Say, we're building a beam, and we're gonna have 300 people walk on it on Saturday night, and so we're gonna have to make it strong. This is how we're gonna do it. You build the pyramid a little bit differently. If you're talking to a CEO, you say, "Hey, this is there's an ROI of this, and we think we can do it in 2 weeks." Those punchy lines. That's not to diminish their intelligence. CEOs are some of the most intelligent people you'll ever meet. Oh. They just have such a broad spectrum that they don't have the brain capacity to think of the detail in every single department. That's actually your job. So you need to be able to communicate those things, timelines. How does this affect the company, and what can we be doing to take advantage of that time? Let's say we got 3 months. Okay. Can we be doing verification and validation testing in parallel in some way, or doing a few additional human factors tests to really take advantage of that time to be more robust, so that when the data is put in front of the FDA, there's no question, okay, yeah, substantial equivalence, you're good. You've proven that you are a solid medical device. So what can you be doing? And that's, as a quality regulatory person, you need to be thinking about the PR. Your job is not to be a policeman for the company, although I think a lot of us think of that way. Your job is really to be a partner with the organization to say, hey, I'm here to make sure you, CEO, do not get into any kind of litigation problems. You, the sales and marketing, same thing. And if I were to speak to them for just a moment, there's a book I think every CEO of every medical device company should read. It's called Cardiac Arrest, 5 Years as a CEO on the Fed's Hit List. And it's by Howard Root out of Minneapolis. It's a fantastic book. I got to interview him back in 2023, I want to say, when I was up there in Minneapolis. Started a medical device company. Later, he sold it. I believe the number is close to $1 billion. And so things worked out. But in the middle there, the FDA came and tried to basically use him as a whipping boy for the industry to show that his salespeople were selling things off-label. Well, ultimately, he was acquitted on all accounts, but it took 5 years, over 100 lawyers, and I don't know how many $1 million in legal fees to get to that point. But it was not an easy part of his life, and it's a worthwhile read. The whole point of that is quality should be one of your core values as a medical device company for 3 reasons. If you want to be financially feasible, which every company should be, money is the air they breathe, then you have to be legal, you have to be quality focused. If you want to get through the FDA, you have to have a quality mindset. And if you want to be ethical, if you ever want your kids, your wife, your family to use your medical device, all of those things require a high level of quality.
Yeah, I think the way you talk about quality, it's the central piece. In architecture, I learned about this quite a long time ago. There's this, and the way cathedrals are made, they all point towards a single point, and usually you have a key there. And I was thinking that was an architecture style that was pretty old back in France. And this piece was called clé de voûte. And this piece was one that if you were to pull it in a very specific way, the whole thing would come crumbling down.
Yeah.
And so in here, when we talk about quality, and cybersecurity, of course, is a part of quality, if you were to take this piece out of the quality, then the whole thing falls apart, because you have a medical device that's not built on the standards that everyone expects. It's not built on what clients expect, what doctors want to prescribe, what hospitals want to prescribe to patients. So yeah, quality is a foundation, and you have to lead that as a CEO. And I think it's very true. It's a very good point.
If we kind of come back around to the original topic, I know you wanted to talk about the FDA and some of the staff. Please. I could kind of run through a quick punch list of things that I think potentially could happen. And some of this may be speculation, but I think it's worth noting. And, I think people can arrive at their own conclusion, both on what they think will happen, but also how they should act. But, just to have a full picture, if there's fewer staff, it stands to reason that medical device submission reviews, whether that's 510K, PMAs, de novos, they're going to slow down. That's the expectation. And that's a high likelihood. Even before these cuts, CDRH struggled to meet those review timeline goals for novel technologies specifically. So with hundreds fewer personnel, those delays are almost certain, right? Okay, so there's that expectation. So adding months, if not years, you need to think, how are you going to do that? How are you going to handle that? The other side of that is for smaller companies, early stage, some of those have a financial milestone where, say, you're Series A backed. After speaking to quite a few different economists about this, if your goal is to get to a Series B and part of your milestone before Series B is a regulatory submission, which oftentimes it is, you may not be able to get that Series B funding. So there has been some suggestion that we will see a lot of companies fail in 2025. I hope that's not the case, but I think we need to start thinking about how can we extend our runway to that next series round. So whether that's use of AI tools or delegation or streamlining, if you have a kind of a comprehensive device, is there any way you can streamline it or eliminate a few different functionality? Start your cybersecurity testing early, your usability testing, all of that earlier versus trying to put it on later and then have to go back and change a lot of things. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add about that.
Yeah, one thing that I'm thinking from, it's more of the business kind of side of Matt right now. It's the idea of perhaps outsourcing a bit of your workforce and taking more independent consultants versus hiring more inside the company, because then it's not as easy to fluctuate if there's a down period within the work. But the risk of this, of course, is that the knowledge of your medical device is also outsourced. So you have to be careful with what you manage, make sure your consultants have written processes as to how what they've done, et cetera. It's not easy, but there's ways of making things a little bit better for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. One other thing I'll mention is, and we really haven't talked about, is MEDUFA. We haven't said anything about that, medical device user fee agreements.
Oh, let's talk about it. What is it?
So the medical device user fee agreement, I want to say it started in 1992, but we're on MEDUFA 5. MEDUFA is kind of how people most of the time pronounce that acronym. We're on MEDUFA 5, which is kind of an agreement where the industry goes to the Congress and says, "Hey, timelines are long. We get it. We need to bring our device so that you can make sure that, yes, it's safe and effective before letting us sell to the public. We understand that process. However, timelines are taking forever. So let's agree. We'll give the FDA some money, and they'll go hire people. It's not as if FDA is in the industry's pocket, like Medtronic's going to spend, millions of dollars, where this little guy's going to spend $20,000. That's not what it is. It's uniform across the board. If you have a class 2 medical device, it's X amount. If it's, I want to say, in the $20,000 range, I don't have the number in front of me. Class 3 PMA is something like $300,000. Although if you're an early stage, first one's free. Trying to incentivize innovation for class 3 medical devices. But all that said, those are funds that the industry pays so that the FDA can go out and hire that expertise to reduce the timelines. And the understanding is we will continue to pay these fees if you maintain a shortened timeline. And the expectation, I think, for the most recent one is 112 days, the average time for one of those decisions to be reached. Well, if those decisions are, if those timelines are extended, then that money has to be paid back. And I don't have all the details of how that works because I don't even fully understand it myself, but I know that's the way it works. So there is some danger there. When I say danger, I suppose two things. I mean, timelines are probably going to be extended, and so the FDA, there's a good chance that they may have to pay those back. So from an industry standpoint, that might be a good thing. But I think they'd rather the shortened timeline to market versus the money. So that's an interesting element, and it's something to watch.
Wow. So this is why maybe all these layoffs are not going to save the FDA money ultimately if they have to pay that back to manufacturers. It can be a lose-lose situation.
Exactly. And if it is going to be interesting to see that because I think the MEDUFA user fees are roughly half. If I'm not mistaken on the numbers, something around $3.5 billion versus their overall close to $7 billion budget. So it's pretty extensive, the amount of,
well, we'll see how that works out. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's challenging. At least you get some money back, right? But it's definitely not going to keep you afloat forever. So another thing that I want to talk about is I've seen a lot of the answers going towards making more with less in terms of maybe you don't... well, really it's a combination of two things. One, you want to do more with less in terms of your employees. You want to have more employees doing more things. And another thing is that you want to make sure that you do not redo certain things because you didn't respect certain FDA expectations of your medical device. And I've seen more and more medical device manufacturers or people go around this industry talking about training and fostering collaboration within medical device manufacturers to be able to gain more efficiency, more speed, and more thoroughness within the medical device submissions. What has been your experience on things that work or things that can be improved in terms of training the workforce in this kind of regulatory affairs and FDA submissions?
That's a good question. Some of the things that I think would be worthwhile looking at would be if you use a CRO for your clinical, for example, they've seen how a lot of these different clinical evaluations should take place. If you're building out a quality management system or if you're maintaining it, companies like Greenlight Guru, I suppose, we with over 1,000 customers, we pretty much recognize how a quality management system should be put together. We know the difference in a good one and a bad one. And when I say bad one that is likely going to incur violations or citations during an FDA inspection. So yeah, you make a good point. There's a lot of knowledge out there, and just simply utilizing it instead of reinventing the wheel, which, for better or for worse, the medical device industry tends to keep things very close to the vest, and everything's IP in their mind. Even, how our SOPs are written and our approach to quality or a quality manual. Well, a lot of that stuff, I suppose it's important to the company, but it's not necessarily, doesn't have to be a secret. Really, the execution, nobody's going to be able to execute it quite like you do. If Medtronic published their quality manual, I don't know that anybody could just say, oh, I'm going to steal this and then implement it, and then I'll compete with Medtronic. A lot of those things aren't going to take place. So if we were a little bit more open with best practices on how to do that, I'm not talking about the product itself, but the company itself, and really approach things that way, utilize that knowledge in the industry, utilize those vendors who've seen it all. Even like CER, for example, clinical evaluation reporting. There are vendors out there who could just write a report or write that for you in 1/10 of the time that it might take you for in-house professionals to do it, and still be probably twice the quality. So there's a lot of those situations that are out there.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is outsourcing certain things. And another idea that many people have had is the idea, especially with the rise of AI, the automation piece, right? How is it, do you think automation can improve medical device submissions? And if so, how would you use it? And maybe I want to hear this one. What are some limits of it as well?
Good question. The limits and the concerns I would have would be, okay, so now I am going the other direction of what I just said, and that would be the IP, because your submission, that's a lot of detail about your actual product. And some of that may have quite a bit of IP in there. So what I would say is, if you manage that side of it, if you get the IT side of it down to where you're secure, AI could really help a lot in just evaluating the readability, the usability, and the way you can analyze it. So there's an analytical side. The actual generation of the content could be pretty helpful as well. For example, like a benefit risk analysis, and the wording of those analyses could be really helpful. So yeah, I imagine you have some ideas on it, though. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. You just gave me so many. Like, for instance, you just said previously that you should reuse certain capabilities that you have in the organization. If you've already done it, don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
So when it comes to making another one, you can say to a large language model, look at this, do the same for this. Ask me the questions that you don't know about first, and then we'll talk about it. And just, the writing part can save so much time, because I think there's maybe you can talk more about this, but I think there's a contrast between the people who need to write are not necessarily the best at writing. They're more analytical. They're different, and also it's going to open the door to more cultures and more exchange, right? Because if you think about maybe someone who does not necessarily speak the same language as you is going to be able to write quality work, right? You don't have to. It's going to make it a lot easier to collaborate. Do you have other ideas that stem from this?
Yeah.
The use of AI for this? So
building on your own personal GPTs could be interesting and helpful in these different regards, and I've done this for different things. For example, if you have a user need that might be not very clear or easily validated, you could build a GPT to just check all of those things. So pull all those in and evaluate those. But then even more than that, there are ways to utilize it from a coding perspective. If you want to figure out how to, say you have complaint handling and you want to input things into the mod database. This is now, I'd much prefer you come talk to us, but this is what we do. This is what we do for a living, at Greenlight Guru. And I like to think medical device companies do what you do best, build medical devices. But if you're not able to use tools like we provide, that's fine. But the mod database, there's ways to be a little bit more automated to make sure that when you have that complaint handling come into your system, whatever that system may be, you know that you're going to report it in the timely fashion, whether it's the 30 days or the 5 days or whatever the case may be. When it's time for you to update your UDI, your unique device identification, into the good ID or maybe to Unimed, you could build something out that gives you a little bit more automation from that perspective. So from an analytical side, from a content generation side, from a coding perspective to integrate into other systems, the AI has so many use cases. And honestly, I think the medtech industry is a bit antiquated in the tools that we use. So many companies I see are still signing things with a wet signature. And if they're not just using paper, because we've been forced to go remote as a result of the pandemic. Prior to that, I think probably the majority were something along the lines of the paper-based. Now we're probably more in the SharePoint and DocuSign era.
Yeah.
But even that, there's a lot to be desired. So,
yeah, for sure. There's so many potential benefits, and we'll still see them being explored more and more. Etienne, if you have one thing that you've seen from your perspective, medical device manufacturers do, whether it's in cybersecurity or not, that was very beneficial for them and that you advise other medical device manufacturers to do, what is that thing?
The very best, this is going to seem high level and basic, but the very best begin with the end in mind. So they know where they want to go, and so they build the vehicle now to get there. And it doesn't mean, okay, I want to go 1,000 miles, so I'm going to build a rocket right here. I'm going to just get it all built. There's more agile ways to do that. But if you're going to go 1,000 miles, maybe putting some wheels on the vehicle would be beneficial. So if you're going to build a device that has a software element, you're going to engage cybersecurity early and not just have to go back and rewrite everything once it's all done. So whether it's design controls, connecting to risk management, you start your design controls, you start your risk management at the same time you start your design controls. Maybe they're both basic. You have user needs, you have a few potential hazards and elements like that. Start connecting those so that you have keep that traceability going, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do my design controls, and then when I'm in the V&V phase, I'm going to bust out my risk management, which means you have to change things. All that to say, because we could go into the niche nitty-gritty on any one of these topics, but the best companies begin with the end in mind.
Begin with the end in mind. It's beautiful. Etienne, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so if you're on LinkedIn, look me up. I try to answer every message people send me myself, so that's me answering. So feel free to send me a message at LinkedIn. Otherwise, if you want to email me, you can email me at my work email, etienne.nichols@greenlight.guru, or my personal email, etiennenichols@gmail.com. I often advise younger engineers who want to get into medtech, and I talk to a lot of early stage founders who are really a little bit lost and really searching for ways to accomplish this quality and regulatory world. So if you're either of those, or if you're somebody else, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Etienne.
All right. Take care.